The King Louis XIV Sorcerer's Son Part 1. Chapter 1. The Burned Name. The parchment burns slowly in the basin, its edges curling like dead leaves in winter wind. Julien de Grailly watched in silence, arms crossed, the candlelight flickering across his sharp features and narrowed eyes. He didn't move. He barely breathed. The name on the paper had once been erased from the royal ledgers. It had not been spoken at court in over 15 years. Charlotte de Grailly. His mother. Dead. Hunted. Erased. Now named. Behind him, the sorcerer paced. Matthew de Grailly, Julien's uncle, was tall and skeletal, with silver-streaked hair tied back in a leather cord. His robe was plain, but the embroidered cuffs shimmered faintly with protective sigils. He stopped before the hearth and placed a sealed scroll into Julien's hand. "This is what I was never meant to show you." Julien opened it. It was a death order, signed not by a judge, not by a priest, but by Marie-Thérèse, Queen of France. The reason listed: for the seduction of the king, the practice of unnatural arts, and the threat posed to the crown by her offspring. "They didn't just execute her," Matthew said softly. "They erased her from history. No public trial. No record in the Bastille. Just fire and silence." Julien's fingers tightened around the scroll. "And the king?" Matthew's voice turned cold. "He let it happen." Julien turned to the window. Outside, the wind howled through the pines surrounding the manor. They were far from Paris, hidden in the forested province of Auvergne, where magic still stirred beneath stone and root. He'd known his mother was gone. She had died from illness, the story said. But he never saw the body. Never found the grave. Now he understood why. She trusted him, Julien whispered. "She loved him," Matthew replied. "And he loved her, once. But kings are taught to love their crown more." A heavy silence stretched between them. Then Julien spoke. "The queen ordered her death. The king allowed it. Then they erased her." He turned, firelight flashing in his eyes. "I'll make them remember." Matthew approached slowly. "Julien, revenge without reason burns more than it scars. This is reason," Julien said. "Her name. Her life. My life." He turned toward the door. "I'm going to Versailles." Matthew said nothing. He only raised a hand, and the heavy chest in the corner of the room unlocked itself with a soft click. Inside were robes, fine garments, a forged letter of noble lineage, and a leather-bound grimoire marked with a crescent sigil, Charlotte's private spellbook. Julien took the book and pressed it to his chest. Then, without another word, he stepped out into the night. The wind whipped through the trees, carrying the last ashes of the burned parchment into the sky. Somewhere in Versailles, a mirror in the queen's chamber cracked down the center without warning. She looked up from her prayers. Her candle had gone out. And in the silence that followed, the scent of lavender and smoke crept into the room. Chapter 2. The Sorcerer's Inheritance. The air in the vault was thick with incense and secrets. Julien descended the spiral staircase beneath the library, each step echoing against stone long forgotten by sunlight. His uncle led the way, torch in hand, the flame casting long shadows across old warding runes carved into the walls. "This is where your mother completed her last rite," Matthew said. "Before they took her." Julien said nothing. His eyes roamed the chamber, a circular space lined with tall shelves of ancient tomes, bottled spirits, and bones polished smooth by ritual. At the center of the room, beneath a ceiling carved with celestial patterns, sat a pedestal of pure obsidian. Upon it, Charlotte's grimoire. The cover was bound in deep burgundy leather, sealed with a silver clasp shaped like a crescent moon pierced by a thorn. Julien approached slowly. The air around it shimmered. "It won't open for anyone not of her blood," Matthew warned. And even then, it asks something first. Julien reached out. As his fingers brushed the cover, the clasp pulsed once with warmth. A cut opened on his palm, not deep, but deliberate. His blood smeared across the cover as the clasp unlatched. The book opened. She sealed it to awaken only when you were ready, Matthew said. Now it's yours. Julien flipped through pages etched in black ink, crimson markings, and alchemical glyphs that shimmered faintly with latent energy. The spells were not destructive, they were precise, political, elegant. Whispers that traveled through stone. Fire that bent to silence. Words that twisted memory, not minds. This was not a weapon. This was a queen's arsenal. And now it was his. At the far end of the chamber, behind drapes of violet velvet, stood the Mirror of Calling, an enchanted relic once belonging to their ancestor, Julien de Grailly, sorcerer to King Henri IV. Julien stood before it. His reflection stared back, sharp cheekbones, windswept black hair, the burn of grief and fury in his eyes. Now say it, Matthew said. Julien held the book in one hand, the forged noble seal in the other. And he spoke. I am Julien de Grailly, son of Charlotte, blood of kings, heir of fire. I go not to serve, but to remember. The mirror shimmered. And for a fleeting second, a woman's face appeared behind him. Charlotte. She didn't speak. But her eyes glowed with pride. Then vanished. Above ground, the wind carried the first signs of spring. Julien packed carefully, noble garments, healing tinctures, talismans disguised as jewelry, an enchanted thread hidden in the lining of his coat. Matthew met him in the courtyard beside a black stallion saddled for the road. You know what waits for you. Yes. Enemies. Yes. Temptation. Yes. Love. Julien paused. His expression didn't change. Then I will burn that bridge when I cross it, Matthew grunted. You sound like your mother. He reached into his robe and pulled out a final gift, a carved obsidian ring etched with the Grailly crest, a rose in flame. Wear it when truth must be seen. Julien slipped it on. When will I see you again? When you no longer need me, Matthew said. Which means not soon. They embraced. Then Julien mounted his horse, cloak billowing behind him, the grimoire secured beneath his arm. He rode east, toward Versailles. Toward the father who abandoned him. The queen who murdered his mother. And the throne that forgot his name. Chapter 3: The Path to Versailles. Julien rode through the forest of Saint-Germain at dawn, the trees thinning ahead as the spires of Versailles rose in the distance, gilded, impossible, and beautiful in the way vipers gleam before they strike. He traveled under a new name, Count Julien de Brillac, a minor Gascon noble rumored to have studied diplomacy and natural philosophy in Florence. His seal was forged. His carriage was borrowed. His papers were perfect. And his revenge was precise. Versailles towered like a vision from a dream, its countless windows glowing amber in the early light, reflecting sky and ambition in equal measure. Gilded gates opened with the creak of authority, revealing gardens carved into order and courtiers dressed like predators in perfume. Julien dismounted, handed his reins to a liveried stable boy, and adjusted the obsidian ring on his finger. The sigil of House Grailly shimmered once, then vanished. No one must know who I am, he whispered beneath his breath. The wards etched into the hem of his coat settled with a faint chill. The entrance hall was a sea of silk and whispers. As Julien entered, heads turned, some out of curiosity, others because they sensed something they could not name. The queen's ladies stood by the marble pillars like flower arrangements hiding daggers. The guards at the entrance bore the royal crest on their sashes, 3 lilies over crossed swords. Julien felt eyes on him. And one of them lingered. Across the hall, a man in a slate-gray coat, eyes pale as frost, stared without blinking. Julien met the gaze, and bowed slightly. The man did not return the courtesy. Instead, he turned and vanished into the corridor. "That's Baron de Mortaine's right hand," a whisper drifted nearby. "Or his shadow," said another. Julien said nothing, but his pulse sharpened. An hour later, Julien presented his papers to the Grand Chambellan, who raised an eyebrow at the Florentine references but stamped the crest with little protest. "His Majesty permits your observation of courtly proceedings," the Chambellan said. "You may attend general gatherings, salons, and minor audiences." "And the Queen's presence?" Julien asked casually. The Chambellan smiled. It did not reach his eyes. "You may attend. You may not speak." Julien smiled in return. "Then I shall listen carefully." Later, in the Hall of Armor, Julien paused before a display of engraved swords. Behind him, a voice spoke. "You stand like a man who's seen real war." Julien turned to find Captain Etienne de Rosier, commander of the king's personal guard, watching him. Hard eyes. Weathered hands. A scar above one eyebrow. Julien inclined his head. "And you speak like a man who's survived it." De Rosier nodded once. "Watch your step, Comte de Brillac. Versailles is not a palace. It's a stage. And we're all being hunted by the audience." In the afternoon salon, bathed in golden light from 40 tall windows, Queen Marie-Thérèse made her entrance. She wore winter blue with white lace gloves, her face carved in porcelain poise. Her jewels were modest, only a sapphire cross and pearl drop earrings. She passed among the courtiers like a blessing made flesh. When her gaze met Julien's, the world stilled. For a heartbeat. He bowed low. And she passed without pause. But Julien saw it. The flicker of recognition. She didn't know his name. But her soul had just shivered. Julien sat alone in his temporary apartments, overlooking the orangery. His fingers ran along the spine of Charlotte's grimoire, now hidden in the false bottom of his trunk. A mirror above the hearth shimmered faintly. He whispered the spell, revealed the shadows behind the glass. For an instant, he saw the Queen's private chamber. And the same man in grey from the entrance hall, bowing to her in secret. She handed him a sealed letter. He handed her a vial. Julien's hands tightened. He closed the mirror. And whispered, "Your secrets are fragile, Your Majesty. And I am your reckoning." Chapter 4: The Queen's Mask. The salon of Apollo blazed with gold. Sunlight poured through the tall arched windows, warming the polished marble and gilded mirrors. Courtiers lingered in loose clusters, fanning themselves and watching each other's eyes rather than listening to words. Julien stood among them, quiet and composed. He had donned a deep emerald coat, laced in silver, a calculated contrast to the ocean of powdered silks. His ring, now glamoured into a simple onyx band, pulsed faintly with warding spells. "Today," whispered Captain de Rosier beside him, "Her Majesty receives petitions from minor nobles and the clergy. Boring, but dangerous. One wrong bow, one misspoken title, and your invitation disappears. Or your throat." Julien muttered back. De Rosier smirked. "You learn fast." The room fell to a hush as Queen Marie-Thérèse swept in from the south corridor. Her presence was not loud, but absolute. She wore a gown of pearl gray satin trimmed with gold-threaded lilies. Her hair, coiled high, shimmered with discreet sapphires. No crown sat on her head, yet she looked more imperial than the king himself. Julien bowed with the rest. As he rose, her eyes found him. Briefly. Calculating. Julien waited as others approached, a bishop requesting funding for a new cathedral, a provincial count hoping for his daughter's placement in court. The queen listened politely, replied precisely, and dismissed efficiently. She was the master of masks. Of ruling without ever seeming to grasp the reins. Finally, his name was called. Count Julien de Grailly. He stepped forward and bowed deeply. Your Majesty, I bring greetings from the Florentine court and humble gratitude for your welcome. She studied him like one might study an unfamiliar coin, gleaming on the surface, but possibly counterfeit. Florence, she repeated softly. How lovely! A land of poets, assassins, and scholars. Julien inclined his head. I've met all three. A pause. Then the Queen smiled. And which are you? Julien smiled back. Whichever the court requires, madam. A whisper of laughter around the room. But her eyes did not leave his. And what do you require, Comte? A place in history, he replied. It was bold. She noticed. Her smile sharpened, so slightly it could be mistaken for politeness. We shall see whether you earn it. The Queen gestured subtly. An attendant brought forth a silver goblet filled with dark wine. Our guests from Florence often favor a taste of Versailles. A tradition, she said, voice light. Julien's pulse sharpened. A trap? A test? He accepted the cup with both hands, bowed, and drank, just enough. He handed it back. Smoother than I expected, he said. Versailles always is, she replied. She stood. Welcome, Count de Grailly. May your days here be long. Then a breath's pause. And her eyes met his again. And uneventful. He bowed as she turned and swept from the room. Only once she was gone did de Rosier step beside him. What in God's name did you say to her? The truth, Julien muttered. Wrapped in perfume. Julien walked the gardens alone, cloak brushing fallen rose petals. He felt the eyes of courtiers on him. He didn't care. The Queen knew nothing of his name. But she knew something was wrong with him. And that was dangerous. In his chamber, Julien lit 3 candles around the mirror and spoke the invocation. The glass shimmered. He saw the Queen's chamber again. She stood before her own mirror, unpainted, unadorned, her true face exposed. Behind her stood Baron de Mortain, eyes like granite, hands folded behind his back. He is not what he claims, the Queen said softly. Then we'll find out what he is, said the Baron. If we must break him, she said, let it be slow. Julien closed the mirror. Try. Chapter 5. The Conspiracy Unearthed. By daylight, Versailles dazzled. By candlelight, it whispered. Julien moved through the private corridors of the palace, beneath salons and galleries, past guards who knew only his forged name. He wore a courtier's coat, but inside his sleeve was a glyph, one of his mother's. It turned him invisible to enchanted surveillance, veiled his aura, and let shadows part for him like water. The royal archive door loomed before him, ironbound and guarded by a clerk with eyes dulled by routine. But Julien had no interest in the door. He whispered a word, and a panel of stone slid silently open behind a tapestry of Saint Denis. He stepped through. Inside the archive, dust hung like fog. Scrolls. Sealed missives. Ciphered war plans. Royal debt lists. Julien knew what he was looking for. The Red Ledger, the royal list of unwritten affairs. Treasonous rumors, threats, debts owed to dangerous people. Only 4 copies existed. Julien opened a drawer sealed in wax and bone. And found it. The wax was unbroken. But the name on the tag chilled him. Mortain B. de. Encrypted, by order of the Queen. He laid the ledger on the desk and opened his mother's grimoire beside it. The ward cracked as if it recognized his blood. He whispered, disclosed the false crown. The letters rearranged themselves. And what he saw turned his stomach. Encrypted in spidery hand, Julien read. 5 names. 4 signatures. 1 monarch to fall. poisoned parchment. Altered wine. Target: King Louis XIV. Method: slow hex via ink used on royal decrees. Result: respiratory collapse over 3 moons. Blame to be placed on foreign elements. At the bottom of the page: witnessed and approved M. Thérèse. Sealed by B. de Mortaine. Julien closed the book, his fingers trembling. This was more than vengeance. This was regicide. And the Queen, his mother's killer, wasn't just guilty of past crimes. She was still hunting kings. He felt a pull in his chest. The glyph on his ring burned. He opened the grimoire again, and the ink on the ledger pulsed with dark light. Suddenly, Julien wasn't in the archive anymore. He stood in a memory echo, a scene recorded in the magic residue of the page. In the Queen's private chapel. She knelt at the altar. Baron de Mortaine stood over her with a scroll in one hand and a silver quill in the other. "The king weakens by the day," the Queen said. "He still suspects nothing," Mortaine replied. "But his physician is growing cautious." "Then see that the physician falls next," she snapped. Julien tried to speak, but his voice had no power in the vision. It was only a recording. "The sun will never rise," the Queen said finally. "I burned the roots once. I will not let them grow back." The vision faded. Julien slammed the book shut, breathing hard. He returned to his chamber well after midnight. He lit no candles. He sat in the dark and stared at the crown-shaped silhouette carved into the marble hearth. His mother's face burned in his mind. Her death. Her erasure. The Queen's hand. But now, the king was in danger. And if Julien stayed silent, he would be the one letting it happen. He whispered aloud into the stillness. "She took my mother. He let her. But if I let him die, I become what she made me." Julien didn't sleep. At dawn, he sealed the message in black wax, marked with a hidden crest only one man would recognize. To His Majesty Louis XIV. Requesting private audience. I know who seeks your death. Sign, your son. He placed the letter in the hand of Captain de Rosier. No servants. No delay. Do I want to know what's inside? De Rosier asked. Julien didn't blink. No. But he must. Chapter 6. Torn between vengeance and duty. The antechamber outside the king's private study was as silent as a crypt. Gilded lions flanked the door, their carved eyes watching as if alive. The thick carpet beneath Julien's boots muffled every anxious step. He had been waiting for nearly an hour. Inside, King Louis XIV, the Sun King himself, was unaware that his only surviving son sat just meters away, carrying secrets that could shatter the throne, or save it. Julien's heart beat slower than usual. It wasn't nerves. It was control. His mother had taught him that rage was a tool, not a wound. He kept his hands gloved, his jaw locked. But behind his calm, he saw Charlotte's smile in candlelight. He smelled the smoke of her execution pyre. He remembered the empty grave. And now, he knew who let it happen. The door opened. A chamberlain in black and crimson stepped aside. His Majesty will see you now. Alone. Julien exhaled once, then stepped into the lion's den. The king sat in a high-backed chair of velvet and iron, a goblet of claret in his left hand, a map of the Spanish frontier spread across the table. His famed periwig was gone. His royal jacket unbuttoned. This was not the Sun King of portraits. This was the aging ruler of a brittle empire, worn from war, godlike but human beneath the gold. He didn't look up at first. Count de Brillac, is it? No, Julien said quietly. That name is a mask. The king's gaze rose. For a moment, the centuries stopped. He looked into Julien's face, and saw it. Something that had been buried 17 years ago. Charlotte's eyes. "Who are you?" Louis asked, standing slowly. "I am Julien de Grailly. That name means nothing at court." "It meant everything to you once," Julien said, voice steady. He removed his glove, held out his hand. The obsidian ring shimmered, and a hidden sigil glowed in violet flame. "I am the son of Charlotte de Grailly." The silence cracked like thunder. The king staggered back a step, not in fear, but in grief. "That's not possible," he said. "You saw her die." "I saw nothing," Julien said. "Because you let her be taken." Silently. Shamefully. "And you left me with nothing." "I loved her," Louis whispered. "Then why did you not stop it?" "Because I was king," he said bitterly. "And kings are told what must be done." His hands clenched. "She was accused of witchcraft. She bore me a child without consent. They said you had died." "They lied," Julien said. "The Queen lied. The Church lied. Mortain lied. And you let them. I mourned her for years," Louis hissed. "And now you come to my court in disguise, threaten me with truth? What do you want, boy? Vengeance?" Julien stepped forward. "I wanted vengeance. Now I bring you something else." He unrolled the red ledger and placed it on the king's desk. "The Queen is plotting to kill you. So is Baron de Mortain. They've cursed your decree paper with hexed ink. You're being poisoned, not with potions, but with signatures." The king paled. "If I remain silent, you'll be dead by summer. If I act, the Queen falls. And so does the monarchy's illusion of purity." "So what now?" Louis asked. "Do I burn for your legacy, or fight for your life?" Julien's hand hovered over the grimoire he carried. His fingers trembled for the first time. He saw the moment again, his mother on her knees. The Queen's signature. The fire. It would be so easy. A single incantation. Let the poison run its course. Let the king die. Let the empire fall. But instead, he took a step back and knelt. "I am your son, not your executioner. Tell me what to do." Louis closed the ledger slowly, looked at the seal of his wife's hand, and then at the bloodline standing before him. His eyes glistened. "Charlotte should have lived. You should have been raised in the light." He reached across the desk and grasped Julien's wrist. "Let me make this right. Together." They burned the forged records in the fireplace. They plotted. They whispered. And in that hidden study behind the gilded mirrors of Versailles, king and bastard became allies. Chapter 7: The Secret Audience. The study's hearth had long gone cold. In the flickering firelight, Julien and Louis XIV stood facing one another, not as monarch and subject, but as father and son, bound by blood and betrayal. "You will remain the Comte de Brillac," the king said, voice low. "The court must not know who you are, not yet." "And the Queen?" Julien asked. "She suspects," Louis replied grimly. "But she does not know you survived. And if she did, we would both already be dead." Louis turned toward the panel behind the bookshelf and pushed it open, revealing a narrow hidden passage winding through the walls of Versailles. "Few know this exists. Fewer still know who built it." "Your escape route?" Julien asked. "My sanctuary," the king said. "Now our weapon." Back inside the king's private chambers, the plan unfolded in tense, whispered stages. "You will remain at court. Attend the Queen's salons. Earn the trust of her allies. Smile at the men who want me dead. And if they try to kill you before they get to you, you kill them first." "And when do I reveal myself?" Louis looked Julien in the eye. When the queen is cornered, not before. You'll be our sword. I'll be your shield. Julien paused. And when this is over, will you name me? The king turned slowly to the hearth, where the flames danced. When it is safe, for the crown and for you. Not before. Can you live with that? Julien nodded. As long as she can't. Elsewhere in the palace, Queen Marie-Thérèse stood before her mirror as a servant combed out her hair. The glass shimmered, not magically, but unnaturally, as though disturbed by breath. She narrowed her eyes. He's closer than I thought, she said quietly. The foreign noble? Asked Baron de Mortain, seated behind her. He has a tongue like his mother's. A presence like hers, too. Shall I send someone to test him? No, she said. Let the boy come to me. Let him dance at my side. I want to watch the fear rise in his eyes when he realizes I knew from the beginning. 3 days later, the court was abuzz with curiosity. By royal command, Count Julien de Brillac was invited to join the royal household as a special advisor to the guard, with open access to the Hall of Mirrors, the king's salons, and even the private chapel. Strange choice, murmured courtiers. Foreign, charming, and untraceable, whispered others. He has the king's trust too quickly. Julien kept his expression unreadable, bowed polite, hand always on the pommel of a ceremonial blade that was heavily enchanted. Only de Rosier knew the truth. You'll be the only sorcerer ever to walk Versailles in plain sight, the captain muttered over a game of chess. Isn't that dangerous? That's why it'll work, Julien said. That evening, a note arrived. On white parchment. Sealed with the queen's personal crest. Julien turned it over. The handwriting was fine and steady. Count de Brillac, I have heard much of your poise and precision in recent court gatherings. I would be most delighted if you would join me for tea tomorrow morning. You strike me as a man worth watching. Marie-Thérèse, Queen of France. Julien folded the letter slowly. So, he whispered, the game begins.
Across every empire, every forgotten age, stories still whisper. If this tale stirred your spirit, leave a like to honor the echoes of the past. Share your thoughts in the comments. Every voice weaves a new legend into the sands of time. And subscribe to our YouTube channel Historical Fantasy Stories, where myths walk beside history, and every discovery changes the world. The next forgotten legend is waiting to be found.